Welcome back to the Library of Awakening. Today, we are diving into a fascinating and thought-provoking book titled Temple of Wotan. This is a work that explores ancient myth, archetypes, nature, spirit, and the deeper forces that have shaped human consciousness across time. As you listen, you may begin to see that this is not just a book about the past, but about forgotten ideas, hidden patterns, and the connection between myth and identity itself. As always, here in the Library of Awakening, we are simply reading and exploring historical, philosophical, and spiritual texts for educational purposes. These are not our personal views, and we always encourage you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. And before we begin, if you enjoy these readings and want to support the growth of the Library of Awakening, please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. This world has for too long concerned itself with spiritual adepts, whom it has aggrandized into often exaggerated and unrealistic proportions. Every representative of divine truth and wisdom, without exception, are, at best, enlightened messengers and teachers of varying degrees and abilities. Yet do they remain bound to the many human frailties and limitations of the human body, and as such, should not be worshipped as gods on earth. Through the course of history, it is proven that people in general tend to unquestionably flow with the herd mentality and have not the slightest clue as to what is genuine truth and what is not, what is real spirituality and what is not, nor do they care to invest any serious personal effort upon which to base their convictions. Why should they exert themselves? The churches are already built and established, and millions of people cannot be wrong, least of all their parents and grandparents. And of course, how dare anyone think of questioning the absolute, supreme authority of the church? Haven't you learned anything yet? The clergy are wiser than you and have all the right answers for everything. If they tell you the world is only 6,000 years old, then by God, you better not question that, or you just might burn forever in hell with the rest of the heathens and heretics. Some of the greatest spiritual sages who have walked this earth, whether born wealthy or poor, have consciously chosen to pass through history unaffected by worldly temptations. Genuine Gnostic teachers are not here to become lucrative, Hollywood-style personalities, like so many modern-day, self-centered, vanity-motivated evangelists. What the Gnostic sage pursues is a selfless, unwavering life mission to elevate the thinking of mankind by giving us a true conception of our position in life and the faceless universe and its higher dimensions. It is the message that matters above all, and not just doing, but being, whether the adept passes through this life as a teacher of great distinction or as a seemingly aimless drifter. There is immense wealth and power in the organized religion business, as one can easily observe by the collective thousands of illustrious and imposing temples, churches and cathedrals that span the globe. And no one knows this better than the gangs and governments, who invent and manipulate organized religions. Invent, you say? Surely now you go too far. No. In fact, we must go much further if we are to shatter the heavy iron chains of man's incommensurable ignorance. Let us not pick at the many small fries and upstarts. Let us go to the biggest manipulation machine of all, the so-called Holy of Holies, Christianity. The first century of our era was a tumultuous time concerning the powers of church and state. The Roman Empire was fast losing its grip on the state cults and national religious institutions. It was evident that if Rome intended to continue wielding religious authority and control, then it would have to establish a major religion, a universal church, that would best consolidate the existing religions, while at the same time diffuse the ardent and independent spirit of the free-thinking populace. The word Catholic, it is interesting to note, means universal, and world domination and power has forever been the aim of the Vatican. Universalism is one of the many tools of the tyrant to achieve such ends. In the Greek Cappadocian city of Tyana, on the 16th day of February 2 CE, there was born a child named Apollonius. It was soon to become apparent that he was not just any ordinary child. but one of exceptional gifts and mental power. At the youthful age of 14, he had so outdistanced his teachers that he was sent away to complete his education. At age 16, he attended the Temple of Wotan. In the same year, he had taken the Pythagorean vows and had already gained reputation by performing remarkable miracles. Apollonius was known to have a striking physical presence and countenance as he grew into manhood. Like Pythagoras, Apollonius travelled extensively in his youthful years, making pilgrimages to the many religious temples and mystery schools. When upon his travels, he would often be accompanied by his close disciples, one of whom was named Lucius. Depending on the language, the name Lucius is pronounced Lucas or Luke. Lucius, was the transcriber of the life of Apollonius, as indicated by Damas, who was the most beloved disciple of Apollonius. If this life story is starting to sound somewhat familiar, it should, because it was from the real life personage of Apollonius that the fictional Jesus was so craftily created. To this day, there has yet to be produced one single shred of sound, historical evidence that a real-life man named Jesus, the Christ, ever existed. All of Rome knew of Apollonius, and had another miracle worker existed at that same time period, it would have been noted and recorded. The Roman emperors sought out such people of miraculous reputation. Apollonius was consulted by not less than 5 emperors, namely Nero, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian, and Nerva. The prototype from which the Jesus figure was created is virtually Apollonius, and not an historical Jesus. It was in the year 325 CE that the Jesus figure was invented at and by the Nicaean Council, and precisely at this time that Christianity was officially created and established by the state. Between the time of the 1st century and the year 325, it was known as the time of the coming of the Christ, which is a title meaning the anointed. For the first 3 centuries, there was only talk of a coming of a Christ. The name and purported exploits of a so-called Jesus had not been determined until the council at Nicaea. The religion of Christianity is almost a carbon copy of 16 former religions, already quite ancient at that time. Primarily, it was the Celtic sun god Iesa, Latinized Jesu, that was adopted by the Roman Church at Nicaea. At this council, representatives from all parts of the Roman Empire are said to have met at the command of the Emperor Constantine to formulate a church policy, a unified creed, and to establish a worship which would bring all of the people under one spiritual head. The adoption of such measures would at once increase the power of the church, as well as ensure the devotion and veneration of the populace for the person of the emperor to whom they attributed divine power. The consummation of this policy was expected to be of great benefit to both church and state, and enable the emperor to fix together into a unified whole the various peoples of the different countries and cultures which would comprise the empire. After this council, the first act of the Church Fathers was to burn all writings they could find, especially those of the first 300 years of the Common Era, which revered Apollonius as the spiritual leader of the 1st century. It was for this reason as well that ancient libraries were ordered to be burned, including the famous and irreplaceable library at Alexandria. It was later revealed that the chief librarian at Alexandria at that time had been warned of the plot and secretly removed some of the most valued writings and sent them to Arabia for safekeeping. Recently, in the 20th century, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the Israeli government immediately took possession of them in order to whisk them away from the eyes of the world. The early 4th century book, entitled The Life of Apollonius, by historian Philostratus, would not surface again until 1501 CE. The first English translation did not become available until the year 1680. 13 years later, the English Charles Blount translation was condemned by the Church, and further publication was prohibited in 1809, Edward Berwick made a new English translation of the volume, whereupon the church confiscated and burned the book so fast that by 1907 no copies were to be found. It was not until 1582 that Pope Gregory XIII devised the New Style calendar, adopted by England, and America in 1752. The Gregorian calendar officially imposed the political and social domination, the Christian era, designating the formulated birth of Jesus at year 1 AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. Short and simple, Christianity is a religion designed by the controlling elite for the express purpose of total world manipulation of the masses, and any and all religious institutions over the ages which in any way conflicted with this idea were to be destroyed. For this reason, the mystery cults were suppressed, and initiation into the ancient or esoteric mysteries were forbidden, so that no religious establishment, worship, or practice could exist which would draw and hold men to it other than the Roman state church. Pagans became the primary target, being that their free-thinking minds would not yield adherence to a mere political and idolatrous church, whose doctrines were, in the main, intended for the uninstructed multitude. Such minds could not be dominated by a political or mercenary priesthood. Religion for Apollonius was not a faith only, it was a science. For him, the shows of things were but ever changing appearances. Cults and rites, religions and faiths were all one to him, provided the right spirits were behind them. Most of the recorded wonder-doings of Apollonius are cases of prophecy or foreseeing, of seeing at a distance, and seeing the past, of seeing or hearing in vision, of healing the sick, or curing cases of obsession or possession. Like all the great pagan religions, the object of his worship is always said to have been the sun, that is to say, the Lord of our world and its sister worlds, whose glorious symbol is the orb of day. Apollonius lived to the ripe age of 98 years old, and was a man of strong physique and health. The most distinguished of his followers was Musonius, who was considered the greatest philosopher of the time, after the Nicaean. Unlike his fictional counterpart, Apollonius prided himself on courage, and though not a violent or hostile man, he represented nature's law as God's law, and would not be one to preach the emasculating, philosophical pablum of turn the other cheek and love thine enemies. Upon hearing the news that Titus had conquered Jerusalem in battle, he immediately sent Titus a high letter of praise, to which Titus replied to the respected sage, I have conquered Jerusalem, but thou hast conquered me. In his travels, Apollonius made a special point to spend a night in the tomb of Achilles to hold communion with this legendary warrior spirit. He, also, restored and erected a statue and chapel to Palamedes, the hero of the Trojan War. When visiting Thermopylae, the famous battle site of Leonidas and the 300 Spartans, Apollonius overheard his followers discussing which mountain was the highest in Greece. He called them to himself and said, This is the highest mountain in Greece, for those who died here elevated it even above Olympus. The warm and fuzzy maxim, peace on earth, good, will towards men, has to be one of the most glaring and barefaced falsehoods ever concocted and uttered by the Christian Church. They certainly expected too much when they supposed that a fiction, which was believed in an ignorant age, would, also, continue to be believed in an enlightened one. There was never a Holocaust that could even compare to the 1,000 black years of indiscriminate torture and death known as the Christian Inquisition. There has been more blood spilled in the name of religion than in all the secular wars of history. Literally, rivers of blood have been shed in the name of the fictitious Jesus, motivated by an insatiable lust for power and gain. Yet, not one drop of blood was known to be shed in the name of the real-life spiritual wonder-worker, Apollonius. To understand the life of Giordano Bruno is to understand the essence of injustice found in the unbridled bigotry of church and state. The ruling factions today maintain power in not so different a manner as it has always been held, which is a combination of instilling fear among its subjects and sugar-coating lies to mask true intent. It is the method of a perpetual bread and circus that the conditioned herd swallows, hook, line, and sinker, every single time, without fail. Evil has ruled the world under countless guises for as long as we can remember through history. It is apparent that evil is hungrier than good and tries harder and will ever remain in power as long as it can convince its subjects that freedom and prosperity is just around the corner. Some are foolish enough to believe that they are free by the simple idea that they have a job which provides them money to purchase food, shelter, and consumer items to subsist in the treadmill existence of their velvet-shackled lives. The fear of a people is that which threatens their illusion of security. What the controlling powers fear is truth and, if need be, will go to any measure to discredit a truth and nullify its effective rationale. A free thinker is what a corrupt system views with much disdain. Free thinkers can inspire others to become free thinkers, much like Socrates, Galileo, or Thomas Paine. And unless a free thinker fears death, he cannot be threatened or controlled. Man lives within the confines of various societies and must conform to certain rules, but never should a man be restricted to express his own thoughts under penalty of death. Tyranny of any form must always be suppressed. If a man cannot speak his mind on any subject, then he is not free. He is a slave to an oppressive system, and less than a man if he does not stand by his convictions. Giordano Bruno was born at Nola, a small town at the foot of Vesuvius, in 1548. As a child, he exhibited tremendous learning capacity and entered the Dominican Order of Naples in 1563. Not one to be held to the restrictions of Christian thinking and dogma. By 1576, now at the age of 28, he had expounded some personal thoughts which hinted at heresy and found it necessary to abandon his Dominican habit and flee Naples. Thus was to begin his emancipation and a new life as an Hermetic thinker, philosopher, scientist, and magician. Bruno reached Paris sometime late in 1581. There he gave public lectures, amongst them 30 readings on 30 divine attributes, attracting the favourable attention of King Henry III. It was in Paris where he published 2 books on the art of memory, which would reveal some of his practice in the magical arts. By this time in Bruno's life, his foundations in Hermetic teachings provided much leverage in intellect and spiritual comprehension. This newly revealed reflection of man's divine potential within the infinite divinity of a vastly expanded universe did not win Bruno many friends among Christian theologians and pedant academes of the day. Like the early Hermetic Egyptians, Bruno believed that through the art of magic and divine rites, man could ascend to the very height of the divinity by that same scale of nature through which the divinity descends to the smallest things, the communication of itself. Unlike Lucretius, whom Bruno carefully studied, he was not an atheist. The infinite universe and the innumerable worlds are for him new revelations, intense accentuations of his overpowering sense of the divine, or they are ways of figuring the infigurable, of grasping and holding within the infinite divine reality. This was a semi-magical, hermetic process used as a mode of reaching intuitive knowledge of the divine. Throughout his life, Bruno was beset by a restless spirit. He was convinced that true philosophy was no different than poetry, music, or painting, since the arts are bound to express divine wisdom. He believed in the infinite perfectibility of knowledge and conceived of the universe as an imperfect mirror of God's essence, in which God's infinity and unity are inadequately depicted. Bruno accumulated his vast knowledge of the mysteries from many sources aside from Hermes, such as Ficino, Pico, Cornelius Agrippa, and Talisio, and Paracelsus. He considered Aristotle one to be pitied as a hopeless pedant who could not comprehend occult truths and was unable to grasp profound magic. Bruno also viewed mathematics as a kind of pedantry, a stopping short of deepest truth. The Copernican mathematics had to be transcended by the further insights of Hermetic thinking. No stranger to the Kabbalistic teachings, Giordano understood that this was a system of learning, created not from the Jews, but from white Egypt. He made his point abundantly clear when he stated, "Do not suppose that the sufficiency of the Chaldaic magic derived from the Kabbalah of the Jew, for the Jews are, without doubt, the excrements of Egypt. And no one could ever pretend with any degree of probability that the Egyptians borrowed any principle, good or bad, from the Hebrews, whence we Greeks own the grand monarchy of letters and nobility, to be the parent of our fables, metaphors and doctrines. The intense religious feeling that had inspired Pico to welcome Magia and Kabbalah as aids to religious insights persists very strongly in Bruno, who pursues his philosophical religion, or his religious philosophy, or his philosophical religious magic, with the deepest earnestness, and believed that it would one day become the instrument of a religious reform, provided that it is understood naturally. The Orthodox Christian religion follows three theological virtues: love, hope, and faith. Bruno avoided the threes, and his guides in religion become four: love, art, mathesis, and magic. By following these four, he believed the religious magus reaches the highest heights of perfection and power. There are two kinds of magic, one bad, the other good. The bad, which is black magic, is a demonic magic, known as the magia desperatorum. The good, or white, magic, by regulated faith and other laudable kinds of contractions, corrects the erring, strengthens the weak, and, through the greatest demon, which is love, joins the soul to the divine power. Giordano Bruno lived at the end of the 16th century, with its terrible exhibitions of religious intolerance. Though there existed at that time various blends of Christian Hermeticism, both Catholic and Protestant, most of them firmly avoided the magic involved. Now enters the free-thinking Giordano Bruno, espousing and stressing full, magical, Egyptian Hermeticism as his basis, preaching a kind of Egyptian counter-reformation, prophesizing a return to Egyptianism, in which the religious difficulties will disappear in some new solution, preaching, too, a moral reform, with emphasis on social good works and an ethic of social utility added to. This is the fact that he unabashedly denounced the doctors of Oxford for what they really were, grammarian pedants who arrogantly demonstrate their literal frivolity and do not understand philosophy. A careful study of Giordano Bruno's life reveals something more than just the man of great occult wisdom and intellect. He becomes the symbol of light in an age of darkness, the very essence of truth and intelligence, seeking a place in a world of ignorance and pompous bigotry. His only crime was that his stratospheric intelligence could not be contained within the rigid confines of academia and the suffocating limitations of the opposing Protestant and Catholic religions. Bruno viewed the Protestants as close-minded heretics who could give no competent reason why their faith was the true one. Bruno could at least see some miraculous works being done by Catholics, but not by Protestants. Catholics see visions, and Protestants do not. Catholics seem to be all agreed as one in their faith at that time, whereas heretic, Protestants are ever divided amongst themselves. Yet, Bruno could clearly see the unmitigated evil which existed in both the Protestant and Catholic sects. Ironically, it would be the latter, which he had studied so well, who would single him out and burn him alive with fiendish abandon. No one religion should ever claim sole dominion over the world. The concept alone is quite arrogant, if not frightening. Concerning the Catholic lust for power, Bruno stated, "Now, whoever does not wish to be a Catholic must endure punishment and pain, for force is used and not love. The world cannot go on like this, for there is nothing but ignorance and no religion, which is good." In the year 1591, a wealthy aristocrat in Venice, who had read some of Bruno's works, invited him to visit, so that he might learn from Bruno some of the Hermetic arts. Bruno accepted the invitation and arrived in August of the year. Considering the religious political climate of the time, one can only wonder what possessed Bruno to place himself so near the hot seat of the Inquisition. Bruno stepped into what would turn out to be a death trap. The minute the aristocrat Juan Mocenigo took offense to something Bruno said, he quickly reported him to the authorities. Bruno made plans to return to Frankfurt immediately, but did not leave soon enough. Mocenigo locked him in his room until the Inquisition arrived to make the arrest. He was incarcerated on 26 May 1592. On that day began for Bruno 8 years of imprisonment in the basement dungeon of the Holy Office. It is not known what exact tortures were inflicted on Bruno to force him to recant at the Venetian trials. However, by law he had to be sent to Rome, where the case was dragged on. In 1599, 8 heretical propositions were drawn up against him. But by the end of that year, he withdrew all of his retractions, obstinately maintaining that he had never written or said anything heretical, and that the ministers of the Holy Office had wrongly interpreted his views. He was, therefore, hastily sentenced as an impenitent heretic and handed over to the secular arm for punishment. His final words to the 9 cardinals who condemned him were, "Perchance, you, who pronounce my sentence, are in greater fear than I, who receive it." On 17 February 1600, Bruno was led from his cell, chained at the neck, his tongue firmly gagged, and escorted barefoot over the sharp cobblestones of the Roman streets. He was lashed to a stake before hundreds of excitement seekers, while torches were laid to the kindling wood below him. A more fiendish spectacle and cruel end one can hardly fathom. But Bruno nobly met his death with a quiet calm, as the flames of Christian compassion consumed the life of one of the greatest, free-thinking minds of the age. 8 years before his death, Bruno penned a startlingly prophetic epitaph for himself. His De Monad, a philosophical poem written in 1592, contains the following lines: "CSV Luke, have D struggled, D thought J would be able to younger. Teland both jate and mature, repressed my zeal and my strength. Even to have eom forth is something times, since J see that being able to conquer is placed in the hands of fate. However, there was in me whatever J was able to do, which no future century will deny to be mine, that which a victor could have for his own, not to have feared to die, not to have yielded to any equal in firmness of mature, and to have preferred a courageous death to a non-combatant life." Thank you for joining us today in the Library of Awakening. This reading from Temple of Wotan offers a look into myth, consciousness, and the power of ancient symbols to shape how people understood themselves and the world around them. Whether you see these ideas as history, philosophy, or spiritual reflection, the most important thing is to continue asking questions, seeking knowledge, and exploring deeper for yourself. As always, we are here simply to read and explore these texts together, and we encourage you to continue your own research beyond this reading. If you found value in this video, please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the Library of Awakening. Your support truly helps us continue sharing more rare books, hidden knowledge, and thought-provoking texts with all of you. We appreciate every one of you walking this path of knowledge with us. And until the next reading, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep awakening.
If you are someone constantly searching for the best books, the rare ones, the ancient ones, the ones that actually change how you think, the Library of Awakening was built for you. Inside CyberX, we've organized a digital collection of over 4,000 powerful and ancient books spanning consciousness, psychology, ancient wisdom, esoteric symbolism, religion, wealth philosophy, global power structures, astrology, symbolism, tarot, sci fi, and alternative history. This isn't a random archive, it's categorized with intention. Inside, you'll find structured sections like the book club for guided study and discussion, the third eye psychology section for deeper perception and awareness, the human psychology and self mastery section for behavioral insight and transformation, even ancient wisdom and esoteric symbolism for decoding hidden teachings. We also have expanded consciousness for higher level thought, religion and spirituality for theological and philosophical study, and elite agendas and global power structures for macro awareness, wealth building and economics for foundational understanding, and even astrology, symbols, tarot, sci fi, and UFO exploration to widen perspectives. Everything inside the Private CyberX Discord is organized for serious readers who want depth, not surface level summaries or trending bestsellers pushed by algorithms. If you're tired of reading what everyone else is reading and you're ready to access books that truly expand awareness, challenge assumptions, and sharpen your thinking, this is where you'll find them. Digitized, structured, and studied inside a focused community of thinkers and like minded individuals. So, head over to cyberxtrading.com, try out the CyberX Discord for a month, and unlock the Library of Awakening. Dive into the collection, find the books that you've been searching for, and maybe even some ones you didn't even know existed. Welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening. I know some of the perspectives that I share may be as challenging for you as they once were for me. But isn't that the beauty of exploration? Every perspective, no matter how unconventional, has something valuable to contribute to it if it's shared. Knowledge is not absolute. It's a living, breathing phenomena, shaped and reshaped over time. The important thing is not always be right, but to always be curious. Explore freely, share boldly, and learn deeply. And don't rely solely on others to validate your discoveries. Stand firm in integrity, even in the face of criticism. Remember that growth always means embracing the humility to admit when we're wrong. Learning from our errors is not a setback, it's the very essence of our progress. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening.